From Corpach. Looking out of the window as you leave Corpach, you'll see the huge sawmill on the shores of Loch, evidence of the importance of forests and timber industries in the area. In fact, there's a phrase in Gaelic, Beshin fiuch a chur the Loch Arbour, meaning bringing wood to Loch Arbour, which was and still is used to describe an unnecessary exercise. It reflects the extent to which woodlands have always been an important feature of the Loch Arbour landscape. Both sides of the loch are fringed with birch and oak woods that extend up the hillsides. There is a long history of management of these woodlands, for timber, for shelter and for charcoal. Today they're highly valued as rich habitats for mosses, lichens and liverworts, as well as insects, birds and animals. Mark Stephen caught up with Ian Strawn, a local naturalist who's fascinated by these woodland habitats.
How good an area is Loch Arbour for tree growing, for timber?
It's a good area because the climate is relatively mild. People who live here might not agree, but it's much milder than further east. The winters are not so cold because of the influence of the Atlantic. And this has a big effect not only on the tree growth but also on the plants that grow on them. We have the wettest climate really here of anywhere in Britain, and the rainfall is quite tremendous. But what's also important is that it's spread throughout the year. We do have some dry periods, but generally there are a lot of wet days when there's at least some rainfall.
Does that mean that this area is essentially a form of rainforest?
These woodlands have been described as temperate rainforests because that's really what they are. The wetness allows lots of plants to grow like ferns as well as mosses and lichens, and it's considered to be as important as the rainforests of the tropics. It's maybe not quite as diverse, but there is a tremendous variety of different species growing here.
What about the history of woodland use in Loch Arbour?
Well, the woodlands have been exploited for centuries. Early on, the access was from the coast, and the woodlands would have been used for shelter, for fuel, of course, very important, the timber for fuel. But in more recent centuries, the trees have become very important. They were very important, particularly in the 19th century, as a source of wood for the iron smelting industry. Through the woods you can find these things called charcoal platforms, which are small level areas where the wood would be stacked up in a mound and covered with turf and burnt very slowly to produce charcoal. That charcoal was then taken by boat along the coast down to Bonor, where there's a very big iron smelting works, and it was used there for the production of iron. These are natural woodlands, but we tend to call them semi-natural because they have all been managed by man over many centuries.
Wandering about these woodlands, what's the real magic of it for you?
For me, the magic of these woodlands is the fact that there's such a richness of small microhabitats within the woodland. You never know what you're going to find around the next step. You can find a fallen tree, what we call a phoenix tree, which has sent up new stems. You can find little holes with really unusual ferns growing in the depths. You can find traces of pine martens, maybe even scratch marks from a wildcat. You can find all these fantastic lichens, liverworts and mosses, endlessly changing forms. And if you have a hand lens, even better, you can see phenomenal things.